start. You can hear me all right? So, with this potential for funding, what we think we can do is really lean into the vision we have. We spent the last 5 years plus developing our comprehensive plan, putting the foundation for what the growth looks like, our vision for our city. We've been building upon that with our strategic mobility plan and with partners across the city to think about how do we invest in our infrastructure to achieve that vision. And so in my mind, where we are today with the potential for funding is to implement that vision, which is mobility and investing in all the ways we move. We'll talk more about that, I think, this morning. We've done and have, I think, some great success, again, with the leadership and prodding of many partners to think about how we should take our current funding, invest in things like our bike program, like our Vision Zero, like our pedestrian sidewalk program. The potential, I think, for us is we will be able to accelerate and amplify that investment in a way that we've never been able to do in the last, you think about in the last 30 years. Great success with transit. We're at a sort of steady state with our other investment, and now's the time to really implement that vision and move forward with the potential for new funding.
Never been called resident prodder before, but that works. I'll take that. Well, first, just we're very fortunate to have this moderate by Zach. I don't know if anybody gets Zach's climate newsletter every week, but if you don't, I highly recommend it. It's very informative. I learn a lot. And also to be with Ed and Jason, who really are the leaders that we need to transform our transportation network at their respective departments, CDOT and CATS. So, but yeah, I feel like I don't have to tell you the state of our transportation system in 2025, right? You all use it, so we're heavily car dependent. As Zach mentioned, that's the way it was designed, right? I mean, Charlotte mostly grew as a city after cars were invented. That's when our population really started to take off. And like, most Sunbelt cities that really grew after cars were invented, we were, the thought was, well, everybody can just drive everywhere, right? And we wanted to get out of the urban core. The urban core at that time was where industry was. There was factories. It was polluted. We didn't have the EPA yet, not even close. We had a lot of air pollution and water pollution, and cities were kind of nasty places to be and not where you wanted to live. So Charlotte grew in the way a lot of cities did. They grew outwards to get away from that pollution, noise pollution as well. So here we are in 2025 in a city that was designed with good intentions originally, which is to get away from pollution to greener pastures, if you will. But what has changed since then, 100 years ago, is we have a lot more people, and we have this thing called climate change that's threatening our very existence on the planet, at least as the way we live today. So now we have to retrofit and go back and redesign our city for the current realities, the current challenges, which isn't easy, right? We have how many hundreds of miles of roads in Charlotte, roughly? Sorry, I said hundreds, I meant thousands. 5,000 or 6,000 miles of roads just in the city that were largely, with some exceptions, designed for one mode of transportation, that's driving. So big challenge, but we can chip away at it. We're chipping away at it, but we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I can start. I mean, for us, I mean, we've been working off plans for many years. We had a plan back in 1998 that led to the passage of a half cent sales tax, 2025 transit and land use plan, and we're in 2025. But it's really important to not forget about the land use component of our plan, because the transit piece, it only works with the land use piece, and transit can only fix problems that are integrated with land use. And that's just such a key component as we think through the next generation of funding. And that funding got us where we are today, the blue line, the gold line. We, practically doubled our service levels in the first 5 years of that first half-cent sales tax. And so as we look ahead to this new initiative with the Better Bus Plan, the implementation of our transit system plan, we do see that as an opportunity to go forth for the next 25, 30, and 40 years. They almost level up in a way that we can meet the needs of 117 people that are moving to this region every single day. And so how do we meet that challenge? We think, is doing things quickly, as fast as we can, and that really is achieved through the bus program. In the first 5 years of this new potential funding, we would double our bus service. We would take one bus. Currently today, we have one bus route at 15-minute frequency. And 15-minute frequency, for those of you that, if you've ever used a bus, that is really kind of the standard to where it becomes an option, so that most of our services today, because they're around 30 or even 45 and 60 minutes, are often used by people who are totally dependent upon that service. And so, but increasing to 15 routes with 15 or better frequency, you get a system that people can depend on to use each and every day. And then taking all routes to 30 minutes or less, and then 100 square miles of microtransit throughout the community in the first 5 years, 2,000 bus stop improvements over 10, we can get to a place where we're really making change and impacting people's lives in every day. Because rail projects will take time, but they're a key piece of moving large amounts of people, but bus is really the foundation of any transit system wherever you go.
I would just say on the strategic mobility plan, just think of it really basically, it's our transportation plan. We have always had one, and really the biggest change about it today is essentially 2-3 years ago, council said to us, with the anticipation of this new funding, give us a real plan, give us specific projects, give us a strategy to actually implement. We never did that before. We've always had a great foundation, a great policy plan with direction about how we should invest, bike, safety, et cetera. But without significant funding, it didn't make sense for us to look comprehensively and say, okay, what would we do across the city, across all the challenges that we have? So what was really unique is we actually now have a plan. You can go look at it, that looks at every neighborhood, looks at all the places and the needs we have around the city, and says, here's what we would do. It's context specific. So as we've talked about, we've got congestion. We've got places where that is the issue, but we also have places where the issue is just basic walkability, basic retrofitting of our infrastructure. So this plan is context specific to that. It is also tied, I'm going to just give you one example of, we've always been integrated, but one of the examples of this integration, as JL talked about in terms of the bus system, what we need to do now is focus on those bus corridors. So those 15 routes he just described, we need to make sure every single feet, every inch of those corridors are walkable, have sidewalks, have the basic amenities of our streets, multimodal where they need to be. We don't have that today. There's so many bus stops and so many places in those corridors where it's just absolutely not comfortable and sort of respectable to our riders and to the residents in those neighborhoods about what that infrastructure should look like. So new plan, we've always had a plan, but this is specific. It's intentional around the funding that we could have, and in a very direct way. And again, this coordination has always been there, but it's about fast now. It's about where should we go specifically? What should we do in the next 5 years? What should we do in the next 10 years? So we're excited about that potential and this integration and this urgency that we have today that we've never had before with the potential for new funding. All the above. That's a great question. So again, I mentioned it. There's been a foundation of work over the last 5 years with our comprehensive plan, our strategic energy plan, lots of other policies that set the foundation for what we should be doing. Recently, as if you've been following we've been developing community area plans now, building upon the foundation of the comprehensive plan to do more specific area plans across the city. So there's been lots of engagement through that process to help us understand what those needs are. What we also did, though, is back to kind of the modeling and the analysis. We took a holistic view of the city. We looked at where our high injury network is, where are there gaps in things like sidewalk, where are there congestion. We looked at the the demographics of area to say where do we have populations that are more dependent or needing of other ways to move. So we did that analysis, and it gave us sort of a heat map. If we layered those things together, you could kind of see where all those things align. So that's where our priority focus was, and that led us to these different locations across the city. And then as we dive into them is where we get context specific, right? So if it was telling us in certain areas that congestion and walkability was the issue, we start looking at those projects. How do we define the investment that leads to that, those specific needs in each area? And they're drastically different. You know, one of the things we've been talking about as we've been going out to the community, if you go out to the far east, Harrisburg Road, if you've been out there, it's a rural condition. It's a 2-lane, you know, farm to market road. There are literally, you know, almost no sidewalks, no street lighting, no safe way to get across the street, but it has a bus route. And so we've made these expectations about how you should live, but haven't, the infrastructure didn't follow. So that gives you an example. And then if you think about where we are today, the needs that we have in Uptown, dramatically different. So the plan addresses those things in a very context specific way.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one quick follow-up on what Ed was talking about, how we made these priorities. You know, for us, you know, 60% of all of our ridership today comes from bus, you know, and the rest comes from rail and other modes that we have out there. Of the 60%, 15 routes carry 60% of that bus ridership. And in fact, 2 routes account for 15%. So, you know, a single route, the Route 9 Central Avenue, accounts for 10% of our entire bus ridership. So it really for us in many ways, we looked at some of the demographic stuff that Ed, and it lines up really nicely with our 15 routes. So for us, it's like ridership. Let's reward the ridership we have first. And that's a key piece of how we made those decisions. But how we make, sorry, what was it? I'm sorry, Zach, what was it? I kind of went up. We weren't going to go on diatribes, and I just did, so sorry. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, if y'all remember the Chetty study that came out, you know, back in I think it was 2015 when that came out, it since has been revised and it's a living, breathing type of research. But what was really, I think, for the telling for the transit piece is that travel time was the single greatest indicator of a person being able to escape poverty and escape their zip code. And so we have a huge impact and ability. Now, we may not be able to make that trip faster across the county to get to jobs, get to opportunity. We can work with CDOT on signal priority if buses get more green time. But what we can do is put more frequencies so those transfers are easier to make. And so if we can do that and we can get people to their jobs in a way that is meaningful, we think that's a big piece of this, because in some ways, if you wait for a rail project or other projects 10 or 15 years out, I mean, if somebody's 2, they'll be 17 entering the job market in that time period. So how do we make that meaningful impact and unlock that capital that has the opportunity to happen with, we think, with high frequency service?
Yeah, so transportation, as Zach mentioned earlier, is 40% of Charlotte's greenhouse gas emissions. So it is the largest emitting sector in Charlotte, but also in North Carolina and also in the United States. So, and that's largely due to the fact that we drive a lot, right? We drive in Charlotte alone millions of miles a year. I forget how many times we could drive to the moon and back every year if you put all the miles Charlotteans drive. And most of us, are still driving gas-powered vehicles. I like to think of it as we each have, unless we're fortunate enough to drive an electric vehicle, have a mini fossil fuel plant under the hood of our car. And there's hundreds of thousands of those in the city. So that's why it's the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, climate pollution. But, transportation vehicles is also the largest source of air pollution. particulate matter, the things that really trouble people with respiratory illnesses like asthma. It's the largest contributor to ozone. It's how ozone forms. It's also our largest source of water pollution, as John could tell us. In order to have a city where people drive as much as they do, we have to have a lot of streets and an enormous amount of parking lots. And all of those lead to water pollution because when it rains, the rainwater runs across those parking lots and across those streets, and whatever's on those surfaces, which isn't very nice, everybody knows you drop the ice cream on the ground, you don't touch that ice cream again, right? I mean, you drop anything on the ground, you do not put it in your mouth, right? It's pretty nasty, right? We've got oil, we've got gas. There's a 5-second rule, that's true. We've talked about that. We've definitely talked about that. But anyway, so, just chemical pollution is all over our streets and our parking lots. A lot of it we can't even see. And when it rains, the water picks that up, goes into those drains along the side of the street, right? And where do you think that goes? It goes directly into our creeks. It doesn't get filtered. It goes directly into our creeks. And we are a city of creeks. In fact, UNC Charlotte did a project one year called the City of Creeks. And that's why our creeks are not considered safe for swimming. There's a time in Charlotte's history, most of Charlotte's history, where you could swim in the creeks. Kids could play in their backyard creek, but it's not advised to do that now because they're so polluted. So I'll wrap this up here just to say, again, in sum, it's the largest source of environmental pollution, whether it's climate, water, air. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. And then health, obviously, is related to all of that, right? How healthy we are, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the toxins in the soil affects our health. And a lot of that pollution is coming from cars. And I don't seem anti-car, do I? I mean, I drive one. But I don't want to drive it for every trip. And I know you don't either. Oh, you stretching back there? Okay. All right. All right.
I'll start quickly. And I'll use two examples, sort of a micro and a macro. So recently, city council support and has helped funding with other partners an EV car share at the Pepper Tree Apartments, and that was a place where the city council invested in affordable housing and then found partnerships to put EV car share at that location. What that means in a very simple way is you could, as a family, own one car and have that ability to have that freedom and accessibility at a moment's notice, or you could not have a car at all and rely in a location where transit is available. And so to me, it's a small example where we don't have to go to the extreme, where nobody owns a car, everybody has to live close to transit necessarily. We provide those opportunities and connect them to goals back to kind of sustainability. I'll even take it out about city council's goals around economic mobility, which is about affordable place to live, a job opportunity, and sort of a simple, affordable way to get between those. And so we can do small things like that to start to move the needle. What I would say, though, at a macro scale, in thinking about support in the community and politically and locally, is around the connection between land use and transportation. And so none of this works. It doesn't matter how much money we put into transportation infrastructure if we're not making good land use decisions. Our comprehensive plans set that stage. But as I think this group knows, that ability and the opportunity and challenge of taking Charlotte, the context of Charlotte, and retrofitting it to be a place that's mixed use, more intense, gives opportunities to make that connection closer between jobs and housing in an affordable way. And it doesn't have to be, every place is intense and mixed use. Every small move we make, if the one trip between your job and your house is just slightly shorter, multiply that by the millions of trips and add that to and calculate what the vehicle miles travels reduction to that is. So this very simple change, even in minor land use decisions, make a big impact. And so the call to action, back to kind of what the community can do, is we're at a point where we need to have a voice out there about those land use changes. What some of the hardest decisions council makes is the third or fourth Monday of the month when they're making land use and zoning decisions. And as you all know, the voices they hear almost always on tough decisions are the opposition. And so we need to start getting out and having broader conversations, support other voices in those decisions, because that's, in my mind, that's one of the biggest obstacles for us to achieve the sustainability goals we have. It's got to be a connection between land use and transportation.
Yeah, that just to add to that, I mean, some of our most successful bus routes are streetcar suburbs in a lot of ways. In some ways, like these land use decisions are literally generations in the making. So it's going to take us a while to claw some of this back, and land use is key to it. But just like, how do you make it more approachable? I think you got to kind of dial into the whole experiential piece of this, the customer experience. And like, how many look at bus stops and you're just like, I wish they'd just cut the grass or pick up the trash. Oh, that person's be great if they had a shelter. I think just little things like that, just improving bus stops, improving shelters, having cover, having light. People need to feel safe and clean, and that has a trickle effect. I think that just newer buses, just all those things I think are really important. Putting bus stops in locations that are integrated with land use and development, so they don't seem like they're just like sticking out there with a pole in the ground. I think it's hard to overstate how important that is. And so I think that's a big piece of it. And of course, there's marketing. I think we need to do a better job of telling people about this. And then to Ed's point, you don't have to we're not saying get rid of your car, got to do every trip on transit, but go to a Panthers game, use it for special events, try different trips out. And then I think word of mouth is really important, and that has a way to build, we think, momentum towards people using transit more. But I do think just improving the physical infrastructure is a key piece of that.
At the risk of oversimplifying it, I'll make it simple. We have to make it easier, safer, more inviting, faster to get around in all these other ways besides driving, right? We're not born to want to drive. Like, it's not like a genetic thing, like I want to drive my car. The reason we drive our cars is because that's what we've designed our city. That's the mode that's the easiest if you can afford a car. It's the safest, it's the fastest, right? It's the most reliable. But we can make transit and walking and biking all of those things too. We just have to make that our priority, right? So if we, instead of doing what we're doing now for the most part, we're still doing it anyway, we got to quit making driving the easiest thing and make these other things easier, right? So, we have the road space. Ed may disagree a little bit like this, but we have enough road space that we could make it safer for people to walk and bike and ride the bus. But that means we'd have to make it a little bit more inconvenient to drive your car. And that's where some of this gets very difficult, right? The space is there, but we might have to, instead of, when we're driving, we have a right slip lane, meaning we don't have to like use the same lane as the people going straight. We have intersections where we have a left turn lane, a straight line, a right one, and then no bike lane, right? Because it's like, if you're driving, we're going to make it easy whether you're going left, straight, or right. And if you're on a bike, well, good luck, right? So, but we could just do one little thing and say, instead of having 3 lanes at the intersection of vehicles, we could have 2. Maybe the people going straight and right can share the same lane. Now, all of a sudden, that little change, you've got enough room for a protected bike lane. So the space is there. We just have to make it safe, fast, convenient. People riding the bus, riding a bike, they want the same things they want when they drive. It's not really rocket science, right? We just want to be safe and we want to get there fast. So that's what we have to think about. And I'll say one thing about buses, that I think is really important that JL referenced. to make buses faster, right, and be able to compete with the speed of driving, and actually, I should say outcompete driving, is we have to do what some cities have done, and we've done a little bit in Charlotte, which is give buses their own lane, and combined with what's called signal prioritization, which just means when the bus gets to the stoplight, boom, it automatically gets a green light. So if you're on a bus, now you're not sitting in traffic like if you were to drive. You've got your own lane, you've got the light turns green, and now the travel time on a bus is actually faster than if you drove. If we make that switch, those buses will be full before you know it, because no one wants to sit in traffic. So if there's an alternative that they can just hop on the bus and get to work in half the time, they're going to take that. But we have to be willing to make some hard decisions, and our politicians need to know that we're willing to make that switch.
Yeah, sure. So oftentimes we're guilty of focusing on, the central avenues and the baseboard roads are heavily used bus routes, but there's a whole county that we serve and today and will continue to serve. So as we think about places like Mint Hill, because there does need to be something for everybody in this plan. And so Mint Hill, for example, like we would work with the town to build a park and ride. So it's easier to find a place to park, have a physical place, have sheltered and covered parking, have operator restrooms. So our bus operators have somewhere to take a break throughout the day. That's a big piece of this too. The operator is a big piece of this whole puzzle and how it works. But then that person can park at a park and ride, go down Laura's Road, go down Albemarle Road with signal priority, as Shannon just mentioned, but then get in the independence bus lanes and then have a really fast trip into town. So there's a whole network of express lanes, throughout this community that we'll be using. 485 will open in the coming year. We have the 77 North Express lanes. We'll have those going to the south. From a transit, whatever your opinion is on express lanes, but from a transit standpoint, they are incredibly useful for us to move through town and throughout the community. So that's a really great way that we can do that. On the west side, so West Boulevard area, today, if you're on West Boulevard, if you live near Clanton Road, and you want to go to the Walmart to go shopping or go to Freedom Drive to a doctor's office, today you will either have to wait 50 minutes for the Route 235 or go downtown on the 10 to go across town on the Sprinter. And so that could literally take probably an hour and a half. So you shouldn't have to go downtown to go across town. And so in the future, we'll have what's called our CATS micro service, our micro transit service, so that you can get a ride within at least 30 minutes and take you point to point in that service. We have that operating in our North Mecklenburg communities, and today we're carrying about a little over 100 people a day on that service, and the average pickup time is about 12 to 13 minutes. And so we have 7 vehicles doing that from North Lake Mall all the way to Davidson, and we have an additional 18 zones we want to do across the community. And I think that it would be a game changer in a lot of ways. Now, we don't see microtransit as a replacement of our bus routes. We see it as a way to augment and do that first last mile to make those connections, because not everybody's going to live within a quarter mile or a half mile of transit, and we have to help them get to that. And to Shannon's point, if we're competing for travel markets, if we're not convenient, we're not competitive, but if we make it more competitive to use transit, it'll be more convenient. And I think that's a big piece of how we move forward. Yeah, 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 yep, yeah, exactly. Yes, so I'll start with microtransit. So we call it CATS Micro. A lot of transit communities have implemented microtransit. Our neighbors to the west in Gastonia did that, called Go Gastonia. I mean, in very simple terms, it is a service that use smaller vehicles, either like a smaller van or a smaller bus, to pick you up on demand, usually through our a pass app, like our CATS Pass app, and you pay through that app, and it picks you up just like a Lyft or Uber would, and would come directly to you point to point within a defined geography, within a zone. Now, what's a little bit different than Lyft or Uber, you will, if the algorithm sees that I can still drop you off within the time that I guaranteed you, somebody else is going in that general direction, then they'll pick that person up and pool rides to a destination. So it's a little bit different than Lyft and Uber in that space because there is a public element. They're fully ADA accessible, and which is a key component where Lyft and Uber are not. And it's a public service, so anybody can use it. And you don't necessarily have to have a app. You can call in, and we will walk a person through to get picked up. And we also do accept passes, and it's the same fare as our bus service, so $2.20. And it's a transfer. So if you take microtransit and then you want to go to a bus, it's a free transfer just like it is today if you go bus to bus. Now, a mobility hub is really like a nice plannery kind of term, but in essence, it's making bus stops, park and rides, and rail stations accessible for all layers of mobility and just make it easier to use bike, scooter shares, ride shares, CATS Micro. And it's really programming like a kit of parts in a way that makes it easier to connect to all modes of mobility.
Just a really quick give an example of what JL just talked about. Back to that example I talked about in the Far East on Harrisburg Roads. That's one of those areas we did the analysis. We have needs, so we're investing. If we had more money, we would continue to invest. There's a microtransit zone potential planned in that area. Within that zone, there's about 30,000 people that live in it. Today, they have literally no access minus an express route bus service along Harrisburg Road. They're in, as you can imagine, a very suburban environment. With this future plan, microtransit, you could have a vehicle come to your house, pick you up, take you to the end point of the Route 9 with 15-minute service. You could get into Uptown, you could get to any location along Central Avenue with essentially those two trips. Today, they don't have access to any of that. 30,000 people don't have transit access, live in a place that we're not going to change, but now we've given them an option. They can do that during the week. On Saturdays, there's about 3 or 4 grocery stores in that zone, so they can go to the grocery store with that microtransit, never have to get in their car. Again, that small change in trips, every mile of travel we take out of that system has a long-term impact to our sustainability goals, but then that's a boost in the household income. One less car, that's what, $13,000 a year in terms of impact. So all those things connect: sustainability, economic mobility, places that don't have transit service today. The potential, I think, is just really transformative.
Yeah, one example I like to give is, has anybody ever had to worry about your ice cream melting when you go to the grocery store? I mean, if you drive your car, you don't have to worry about that, okay? But if you ride transit and you gotta like take 2 buses to get to that grocery store, you may make different choices about the food you buy. You may not buy food that's easy to use. You may go and just whatever's convenient, which may be the corner store, which we all know is a contributor to poor health within many of our communities. So in transit, in so many ways, to Ed's point, being able to connect to a grocery store, being able to go to a doctor's office within your own geography, because it takes a lot of time if you're transit dependent today to move around, and you make different choices about childcare, about jobs, and about opportunities. So this is really unlocking the potential of people that don't have opportunities today.
Well, I just want to say I've never highlighted the ice cream benefit of better transit, and I'm going to start with we can increase the ice cream consumption of transit riders with
Not
better
paid by
service.
for the ice cream lobbies.
I think I'm going to start an ice cream company when that when that new transit plan gets funded.
Yeah, not knowing the exact address, but Stowe Haven's a pretty large neighborhood. They could be fairly deep within that and may not be easily walkable to Monroe or Rama Road. But in many ways, buses, all forms of transit and mobility can only exist or serve the infrastructure that's there for them. So a 40-foot bus can really only usually drive on like a larger infrastructure or thoroughfare roads like Monroe Road. I mean, how we make decisions where bus routes go is often based upon those kinds of things, the street connectivity. And so like a very large neighborhood like Stonehaven, I would think through like Ed's point about making those connections, ensuring that it's safe, that it's walkable. To Shannon's point, putting bike infrastructure in place so that people can make that first last mile. We can't put microtransit across the 500 square miles of the, we're getting close. we have quite a few zones that we want to do. That's one strategy. But I do think it is helping make that first last mile, and maybe that is through making it easier, more walkable. But making decisions about where we put transit, it's not an island. It's totally integrated within the land use that's been, generations in the making, the infrastructure, the roads that are there. I think that's a key piece to that. Yeah, I mean, it actually goes all the way to North Lake Mall. So it goes, it has a big portion of Charlotte that also gets served all the way to Davidson. We launched that in late February, and it's every week we're seeing increases in ridership. We had a fare-free week this past week on the service, and one day we carried about 200 people. So each month we're seeing increases on that. We see a high customer satisfaction on that. It currently has a service underlying it called the Village Rider, which for 20 years, we've had only 60-minute service up there. And so it's a huge game changer in how people move within the community.
Thank you. Brian Myers, ESPN, the magazine. Sorry, I just always wanted to do that. I guess just take a step back for the 1 cent tax bill. Where is it right now as of 10:10 a.m. this morning? And then how confident are you all that it gets to the next step? And then how confident are you all that when it goes to vote, it will pass? And then if I have time, I probably have a follow-up question to that.
So where is it and how confident are we? So if you've been following it, there have been legislation that's been introduced at the state level to give us the authority to put a sales tax on the referendum to the voters. The fact that, and so that's been years in the making to get it to that step. I would say the fact that those bills were introduced is monumental. We would never have gotten to that point if there wasn't interest and support at the state level. So I'm extremely optimistic that we're going to get the authority. I'm extremely optimistic that it will be supported by the voters. We shouldn't take any of that for granted. This is a significant tax. It's a full cent. We had the half cent on transit, and that wasn't an easy battle conversation. There was after it was adopted, there was a move to repeal, et cetera. So we shouldn't take any of that for granted. But I'm extremely optimistic. I would say at the state level, at the regional level, I think everyone understands the need for infrastructure, and a place like Charlotte and the growth that we have, that's a significant need. Charlotte in this region is a significant part of the economic sort of growth of the state level. So certainly there's an urban-rural conversation, but I think everybody understands the need for infrastructure. Really extremely optimistic. We got the jurisdictions in the county to support it. So I'm very hopeful, but again, the ultimate referendum, I think we all need to not take it for granted. We need everyone out there talking about the value and importance of it, and building that conversation.
So how can we as people that are attending this conference today advocate for voters, for the state, to make sure that this passes?
I would presume you guys, I mean, and Sustain has lots of avenues, and I'm sure Shannon will give you lots of opportunities. It starts very simply. I would start reaching out to your elected officials, both at the, I mean, we all, if you live in the county, you're likely represented by both either a town elected official or a city elected official and a county elected official. So you have the opportunity, and those are particularly the county, are the ones that will ultimately make the decision to put it on the referendum. So your county representatives are, the sort of the key to that. So I would say you need to start sort of communicating that to your elected officials. If you're part of other groups that have a broader position on that, it's really important to get out there and start talking to them. We've been out in the community a little bit, kind of gauging interest, and certainly the basic question is, what is it in it for me and for our neighborhood? So we've been starting to have that conversation, and so in your neighborhoods, in your areas, you start thinking about what that means for you. Ask those questions. We're there to help answer them, but hopefully with that clarity, we really need voices to be out there saying this is an important thing, and very specifically talking to your elected officials.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I would just add, so right now there's not, at the moment, there's not a lot we can do legislatively because it is in the hands of the state. And the good news is all of our legislators in Raleigh, state legislators from Mecklenburg County, are on board with this. There's, I believe, 100% support from our delegation, from the MEC delegation. So it's really up to the legislators from outside of Mecklenburg to decide to give us the ability to vote on whether we want to tax ourselves. It's a very strange thing. We need the party in control, the Republican Party, to say yes, we'll let voters make local decisions on this. But we don't really have Republicans in the state house except for 2 in the Mecklenburg delegation, so we're really just dependent on the leaders of the committees to support this. And the good news is the bill that's been introduced in the House and the Senate, both are sponsored by Republicans, very powerful Republicans. I think it's the chair of the Transportation Committee, and I think also the chair of the Appropriations Committee are sponsors of these bills. So that does give us a lot of confidence. But what can you do now while we're waiting for that to hopefully happen is we need to educate as many people as possible across Mecklenburg County what this sales tax will fund if they vote for it, should it be on the ballot in November. So we can start that work now. And we've started that work as Sustain. As Ed said, the city started that work. So what we would love to do is come give a presentation to your neighborhood organization. If you live in a neighborhood with an organization, a neighborhood association, homeowners association, or you're affiliated with an organization, be it a business or a nonprofit, we'd love to come give a presentation, or maybe ask the city to do it, about what's in the sales tax specific to that organization's members. So we're going to be doing as many of those as we can, and the city is too, just to make sure people know what is at stake here, should they have the chance, how important it is to go vote in November, even though the president's not on the ballot. It's a low turnout election because it's off season, off cycle, rather. So we've got to get as many people as possible to the voting booth in November to approve this. So all the things we've talked about today can be made possible, because everything we've talked about really at this point is just a dream, right? As the saying goes, a vision without action is just a dream. So we have a vision, but it's still in that dream state. We can't really take action on it for the most part unless we have this sales tax pass. So yeah, help us use your own networks to educate them about this, how important it is, and then invite us to come talk more detail about what's in it for your neighborhood.
Yes, I mean, so that conversation's been going on. Connect Beyond, this is sort of the regional vision and plan we have, has been doing that for years. JL can talk more about that plan, which is a, broader multi-county conversation. We share in the needs of infrastructure. These bills potentially would give other counties, not just here, but across the state, the ability to do the same thing, to put a referendum to their voters to talk about and support potentially investment in transportation. And so that's been the level of conversation. Certainly, we have a level of density and economic development that many counties in the state don't. So the conversation around tax is a much harder one. What I would say, though, just even in our 3-county region, the MPO that we exist, which includes Iredale, Mecklenburg, and Union, we get funding from the state for transportation. We have our local partners have the ability to put funding to those projects. With more local funding, we actually raise the tide for everybody in that region. So funding that we would put to state projects in our region, the city of Charlotte or any of the towns, would make more funding capacity for projects in Union County. So there's a story to be told in regions that as we invest together, even if it's just the county or the city here doing investing with a sales tax, our ability to add to that funding gives and supports funding across the region. So very different conversation in those other counties, but there is a story to be told that, again, a rising tide on funding supports everybody in the region.
I have it. Hi, Kristen. You touched on this a little bit, and first I want to say the microtransit is a great idea. Recently, I had an injury and my car was damaged, so I had to take a light rail up to 7th Street and hobble over to Harris Teeter because the buses took too long to come, and then the light rail. So awesome that that's available. But does this new plan ensure that every single bus stop has seats, covers, and trash cans? And then my second question is, we saw with Love and Life that the light rail and public transport really did an amazing job at like decreasing the impact of traffic in Uptown and South End and Noda area. So for Panthers games, and I think we saw it yesterday with the bananas in town, and we're gonna see it today when we leave. Is there any movement where like we're saying, okay, there's gonna be a park and ride in Matthews, so we know game day transport will be available, so that's less cars in Uptown that are impacting people that actually do have to drive for work or for things around Uptown?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and the 2 nights with the bananas is crazy. It's like 74,000 people were at Bank of America last night. But to bus stops. So today we have about, I would say it's about 500 stops or so that have either a bench or a shelter, and we have numerous on top of that that have trash cans. And so with this plan, we're looking to do over 2,000 stop improvements, and that would be a mixture of waiting pads, shelters, benches, trash cans. We're trying out some solar lighting, potentially even solar lighting that could enable somebody to charge their phone, just little things like that, just to get to that experiential piece. So that's a huge component, and we'll move as fast as we can with that. We want to do that within the first 10 years of this funding, but we'll be able to see stop improvements in the first year 1 of this. We're already gearing up. We got about 150 stops in design right now, so we're just ready to go, coordinating with CDOT and Ed's team on stop improvements along these strategic investment areas. So it's just the missing piece of it is the funding, and and staffing time, and that's going to take people and time. But that's a commitment that we have made to the community. Now, as it relates to like special events, we historically with the blue line and the gold line to some measure have really marketed that and leaned into that being a great way to get to special events. But with the new funding on the bus side, we do see opportunities to, say you're in Cornelius or Davidson, in a more regional standpoint, or the Matthews Park and Ride that we have there off Independence Boulevard, putting express service on the weekends and marketing that as well. So there's a big, we talked a lot about 15-minute frequency, but we have, close to 20 or so express routes that we want to put 20-minute frequency during the day, but also put it in the midday, do nights and weekends. That's another piece of this. And we do think there's a whole market that we're not capturing on the bus side for special events.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to make a couple comments. And one, I just noticed Jason has multimodal socks on. There's I mean, I've never seen this before. They have a bus, a train, and a bike. I mean, this guy is, I mean, he wears it on his ankle. Uh, no, we need to get some branded socks like this. Like we're gonna talk later about where you got those socks. Mm. We do look at Austin a lot. Austin is a great model for what we're talking about. Okay, socks noted. We're gonna get some of those. Stay tuned. Next year, your admission ticket will come with a free pair of multimodal Sustain Charlotte branded socks. We'll get the city's logo on there too. What I was gonna say is I'd like to take your picture real quick, if that's okay. I know we had a photographer in here, but I really like to get a picture of you guys smiling. Like if I don't pause and do this, I just take the picture. Like you guys look too serious. So I'd like to get a picture. This is for all the social media platforms. We won't be sending out a waiver. So if you don't want to be in the picture, please step away. Oh, sorry. I was supposed to mention that earlier. Anyway, are you guys getting out of this what you wanted? Like, are you guys learning anything today so far? Yeah, Mary, go ahead. Mm, very good question.
So just, you mean like where a private entity is helping to speed up like implementation? I can't speak, the rail programs are a little bit different. I mean, there are different ways to deliver project. You're probably, project delivery. There's, an example of that would be the 77 North Corridor. I mean, that was, implemented through a private corporation, but it was, some dollars, ours in there. But I will say, like, what often sometimes gets forgotten, a lot of infrastructure in our community is built through private dollars, in some ways through, as we coordinate on, as rezonings, as development comes in. So, as a development comes in, we review them and we say, hey, you have so many units, we like you to build like a bus pad for us. So we get a lot of pads and sometimes even shelters provided through the private community. And so we have, why it's not, we have 3,000 stops. Why do I not say we're going to improve 3,000 stops? Because we have probably, I would say, 200 to 300 that are going to be provided by the private companies as those developments come in. So that's certainly a piece of that. But we're also looking for partnerships for service. I mean, we do work with, private entities, agencies outside the county to help contribute to service, to pay for that service. Those are other options. I don't know if Ed's add to that.
I think it's a really great point, Mary. And we have a board member who works at Wells Fargo with Genevieve, who has asked this question before. And working at the Wells Fargo Investment Bank has had the same thought. Like, we are a financial center in Charlotte. Can the financial companies help accelerate investment in all of this public infrastructure that we're talking about? So that nut has not been cracked, but I think that's something that should be explored further. I'm sure there's examples of it in other places. And yeah, I mean, this requires a lot of money. And as we've been talking about, our 100% dependence on public money has really been why we're so far behind. I mean, we would have liked to have made these investments, particularly in transit, a while ago, but we've been waiting for the political winds to blow in our favor. So, it would be great if we didn't have to be wholly reliant on politics to get the money needed for this transformation that we need.
I hope my question won't be too much of a downer, but local initiatives like this that we're talking about are often leveraged for federal dollars. And as we probably all know in this room, we can no longer right now certainly connect or count on rather the federal government and them supplying potentially 50% of funds for a capital project or for some of the other initiatives. And I guess my question for you all is, from a contingency standpoint, that if the federal partner will not be there, are we kind of planning, or at least thinking that the initiative that's being advanced is going to be enough to help cover all that's in this new plan? Can you just speak to maybe kind of that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's just these things have arcs, right? The politics of things. So I mean, if you look back, we've been very successful here in Charlotte and in the county with getting funding for rail projects in particular, and even for the state. You know, the state paid for 25% of the original Blue Line. So, I mean, we've been very successful with that. I would just say that, you know, infrastructure is what we have heard is typically popular, regardless, whatever it is, you know, because it's about economic movement. And, you know, as we look ahead to, say, the Red Line, the line, the commuter rail line to the north, the Silver Line, the connection between the airport and East Charlotte, uh, when we go for funding, we're still many years from that. You know, the most important thing is be ready when the money's there. And I can't express that because we're competing. We're not competing necessarily with Raleigh or Concord. We're competing with Austin. We're competing with Nashville, and they're moving. And so it's the most important thing for us to do: get things designed, look at the right of way, be ready when that comes there. And because politics will change, and we've been like a reed in the wind when it comes to politics. But, you know, just the bus and bus facilities grant came out recently, and we're going to purchase buses with that. Now, they may have changed the criteria for how they award it, but we adapt. And I think that's the most important thing: is be adaptable and just be ready when the money's there.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we need the local sales tax in order to even compete for the federal grant, right? Yeah, so that's the other reason we need the sales tax. That's a requirement. If you want a federal grant, you need to have that local piece in place. And like JL said, you know, we're not going to build those rail lines in the next 3 years. So hopefully the political winds change before we actually need that grant money, and we'd have a more favorable administration federally.
Oh, you gotta put it. I would just say, back to this, are we optimistic? I mean, we should take a 30-year view, look back and look forward, which is 1998 was a huge step in Charlotte. And think about what Charlotte looked like back then, you know, before, barely just before the Panthers and all the investment we've made in the city and in Uptown and the transit system. We're at that same moment today. This decision, the place that we are now, will set the course for the next 30 years. If you think about what Charlotte looked like then and now, think about what Charlotte looks like today and what it could like in the future. And so I'm personally just and professionally very excited about where we are. This is an opportunity that's once in a generation. We need everyone's support and to lean in. But to me, I think it's one of the most exciting parts or times of Charlotte's history, and we're all at this sort of the ground floor.
Yeah, I would just encourage, just educate and, you know, go to our websites, understand what this is going for. There's a lot of articles and opinions out there, but just, you know, reach out to us. We can tell you what, you know, because that's our role. We educate in this space and can tell you what exactly is going for. If you've got a community and neighborhood, we can show you, well, this bus route, these stops, this rail project, and get really specific on this, because one thing we don't have is time, and we'll never get time back, and inaction is a decision. So action is needed for us to address the challenges that are ahead of us. And investment, and we've been very clear about this, like 20% of this new funding will go to bus, and it'll go very quickly into bus. And that's such a great thing that we can do for our community to really impact the lives of our individuals that are here now. But we're also building this for people that aren't here now. And we kind of think about that. I have a 1-year-old, you know, and so as I think through this, when Silverline comes, and I will be much older then, but he'll be maybe just starting high school. And so just, you know, you put these things in a generational standpoint. Excuse me, and that's where we are. This is about a generational change that we can really make movements in the community.
I'll agree with all that and echo all of that. Great comments. I would just want to thank you all for being here, right? I mean, there's a lot of things you could be doing on your Saturday besides being here learning about this stuff. And many of you I know are already active trying to make Charlotte a better place, a more sustainable place to live. So thanks for being here, and please help us grow this movement. You know, bring your friends, bring your family to these events, get them to follow us on social media or get our newsletter, however you think they'd want to get connected, but help us grow the army, if you will, because for these guys to do this stuff, the politicians need to hear from you, right? There's a lot of people who don't want things to change. They're quite happy with things, right? And we have to be more than them. We have to be louder than them, and our elected officials have to hear that so we can make some of these tough political choices and have those wins.